The looming threat of water scarcity has become a stark reality for millions of Gauteng residents. As climate change intensifies, experts warn that day zero, a day when municipal water supplies run dry, could just be 5 years away. Dam storage capacity, poor water infrastructure and climate change are some of the challenges that could contribute to the scarcity. To delve deeper into the crisis and explore potential solutions, let's speak to Manzi water publicist Anneke. Anneke, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for speaking to us. Let's start off with the current state of Gauteng's water crisis. Where are we and what would day zero look like for the province?
Thank you so much. Well, I think it would be quite disastrous to have a situation where the biggest province in South Africa would see its taps running dry, particularly for our more vulnerable communities and particularly as we face various other uncertainties relating to the climate crisis as it unfolds. And so it is quite concerning that we seem to be heading down this path towards uncertainty around, well, not just uncertainty, but a grave threat around something that is, in fact, a basic fundamental human right, which is access to clean, safe, and hygienic drinking water. I mean, it's a matter of serious concern.
Anneke, you talk about this timeline being 5 years away. Now, every day we get closer to that 5-year mark. Just how much work is being done to push away or pull away from that 5-year day zero, if you will?
Well, I think there is work currently being done. However, the problem is that I think we're still seeing silos. I think we're still seeing a case where the various entities at the state level, as well as entities in the civic and private spheres, are not necessarily all pulling together towards that direction of water security. And, as we mentioned, it is, of course, a serious threat and a serious concern. Just, from our perspective as Manzi Water, we do our best, to support various communities when they are in need of water, when taps are run dry, in cases of water maintenance, burst pipes, etc. But as these occurrences they seem to be becoming more frequent and the situation seems to be becoming more intense, it would be very important for our stakeholders, as I mentioned before, the players in the state, the various entities operating on the government side of things, as well as private sector and civic bodies to come together and really work out what is the going to be the best long-term solution to ensure water stability and as well as safety and quality.
There seems, Anneke, almost a sense of conjecture, if you will, around whose responsibility it is to ensure that the nation has adequate water supply. Is it national? Is it provincial? And earlier on, we had a conversation with one of my colleagues in eThekwini and the challenges that they're facing. And those challenges are, for them, immediate. And in a few months' time, when tourists rush down to Durban, the challenges could be catastrophic. So who should be leading the charge to ensure that not just Gauteng, eThekwini, or any other province in the country has sufficient water supply?
Very important question. Yes, ultimately, currently, one could argue that the state or the government should be leading the charge and should be facilitating more people coming into the fold to offer counsel, to offer expertise, to offer support, as it's needed and as it's viable. However, I think if the recent election outcome has taught us anything, it's that our society is moving towards a more heterogeneous, more egalitarian sort of state, if you will. And so I think that means that there's space for more people, more players to come into the conversation about what does water stability look like in our region? What does access to safe water look like in our town, in our community? And for them to have a voice in a real meaningful participation process, not just sort of, a box ticking exercise, which, I don't want to rub anybody the wrong way by saying this, which would lead us down the line to being in exactly the same situation where, we're only being kind of brought into the conversation once it's already at a crisis point. So it would be fantastic to start to see that egalitarian and the real genuine democratization of decision making as it pertains to the elements that affect our daily lives, such as water, the provision of energy, and those very key basic issues, to have average ordinary South Africans and people who are in the sector and in the space have a meaningful voice as far as that conversation goes.
And like another important conversation is the explanation or the connection between water scarcity and potential conflicts, particularly in the South African context. What are your views on that?
Yes, I think scarcity is a big risk factor in any sort of context, so whether it's scarcity of job opportunities, scarcity of electricity, scarcity of food, and in the very same way, scarcity of water. And I don't think we fully understand really the risk that we are facing as a society, not only in terms of conflicts that may arise, but also in terms of vulnerable communities, in terms of who really has access to water. But I mean, when a dry tap doesn't discriminate, and that must be said. However, it is the people that are on the ground, that are in the more vulnerable areas, that will be bearing the brunt of it. And yes, I don't think the risk for conflict can be understated. This is a serious issue, and it needs to be addressed. And we need to have, as I've mentioned before, a more inclusion as far as the conversation on exactly how does this problem get addressed, and how is it going to play out in which areas? What are the risks that those various communities might face, and how can we band together to protect against those risks and prevent them from arising in the first place?
Now, one of the things that we learn is planning ahead. Just how much planning ahead is there, or just how little is there, I suppose, is the question. Because these conversations have been had for many, many years. I mean, we talk about the infrastructure and there are growing populations, urban populations across the country that are not being catered to because the infrastructure is not being developed to cater for the hundreds of thousands that have moved into certain geographical locations.
Yes. I think, firstly, on the issue of migration and people moving to in search of various opportunities to improve their lives and their families, I think freedom in that sense should be encouraged. I think it's the onus is in that instance definitely on officials. And when I say officials, I mean local and provincial. But as you know, these mandates, they cross-cut the various spheres of government. And so they must work together to make sure that the bulk infrastructure that is meant to service communities is A, maintained, and B, developed and invested into such an extent that these sorts of crises can at best be, or worst case scenario, be well mitigated and at best be avoided in the first place.
Now, there has been some talk of a toxic triangle, right, which is climate, conflict and corruption. How does corruption specifically exacerbate water scarcity and that same conflict in South Africa?
So I think the challenge is, if we look at something like maladministration, which we could say has played quite a serious role in the South African democracy in terms of the delivery of services and delivery of effectively government's promise to the people. And of course, we can't argue we can't deny that has played a role in the limited or lack of investment in maintenance of the bulk infrastructure. Because in the Western Cape a few years ago, when we faced day zero here in this context, you may know I'm based in Cape Town. When we faced the water shortages here, it was largely weather related. However, in Gauteng, the case seems to be that it is a maintenance and an infrastructure related problem.
So a man-made issue.
Which should have been avoided had we, quote unquote, kept our eye on the bouncing ball and really been focused on what we should be focused on, which is delivery and ensuring that South Africans do have access to clean, safe drinking water, as is their human right.
And a final question, why is Gauteng not learning from the lessons of Cape Town, or any other province for that matter, that seems to have gotten the problem right?
Well, I think Gauteng has no choice but to learn now. So, ironically, when we had the Day Zero crisis unfolding in the Western Cape, I was based up in Gauteng at that stage. I was in Johannesburg. And that was really right around the time when we started seeing the unfoldment of these minority/coalitions, etc. And around that time, also the conversation about a lack of investment in bulk infrastructure was very dominant, and the fact that there was a backlog that we are now, I guess, paying for. And so it is a man-made problem, but it is a solvable problem. And it would mean needing to put our heads together to find a solution that is going to be equitable, workable, and that is not going to come at the detriment of our most vulnerable.
Anneke Burns, a publicist for Manzi Water, rather, as we take in conversation, take stock of Day Zero. That's 5 years away for Gauteng, and calling on the administration in Gauteng to learn from what other provinces, such as the Western Cape, have done to deal with their water challenges.